back with another edition of the Roy's Boys podcast. With the Miami preview tonight, Carolina does go to Coral Gables on Saturday, another noon tip for the Heels, playing against one of the bottom feeders of the ACC. And, Anthony, the Heels got a pretty big win the other night against Notre Dame to get the bad taste out of Louisville out of their mouth. But this Miami team, even though they're not as good as they have been in the years past under Coral Gables, this has been a house of horrors for the Heels of late.
Yeah, you got that right. I mean, we know 2 years ago when we went down there, we pretty much got destroyed from start to finish. So it should be a tough test for sure. But did you say by the way? Did you say that they were coached by Coral Gables? You mean by Jim Larrañaga?
No, I said we're going to Coral Gables.
Oh, I thought you said coached by Coral Gables. Yeah, Jim Larrañaga, though, fantastic coach. Should we expect anything else in the ACC? I mean, they seem to bring it every night with these great coaches. So, I'm with you. It won't be easy. They're coming off a pretty long rest as well. Trust me, they have not looked good so far this season, but as we know, records don't really mean anything. Just look at the Louisville game. So, yeah, we're going to have to be ready to go, and we'll see what type of mindset these guys come out with. Hopefully it's a good one.
Yeah, they haven't played in over a week, or this will be their first game in a week, and they kind of got, I think almost every team in the league has this kind of week off now with as early as conference plays beginning. And the expansion, and they got their, little bye weekend early. And I think, for a lot of teams, this will be very beneficial, especially for this Miami team, because, they're 9-7, 1-3 in ACC play. And this is a team that's lost to two teams in Yale and Penn. So, mid-majors that have been okay, but, not knock your socks off. They've lost at home to Rutgers. They lost at home to Seton Hall. But, this team has gotten a little bit more competitive in ACC play, which is kind of, dumbfounding when you look at as many bad teams they lost to in the non-conference. But, they're led by Chris Likes, who's averaging about 18 points a game, and Ibuka Izundu inside has been a load, averaging over 9 rebounds. So even though this team on paper, record-wise, isn't very good, they do have two capable players that Carolina will have to deal with on Saturday.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Likes is a guy that, Carolina fans will probably remember from last year. He had a pretty good game against us. But, yeah, I don't really know what to make of this team. When you look at them, they, like you said, they lost to both Yale and Penn at a conference, got actually destroyed by Penn in that game. The loss against Rutgers, not a good look, but then a close loss against Seton Hall, a team who right now is one of the hotter teams in college basketball when it comes to the bubble teams. And, you also look at it, and, they have a good win over Wake Forest. I don't know if you would say it's a good win, but at least gets them a win on the board. And that Wake Forest team, of course, went and they beat State the other night. Of course, welcomed State into their place, but still, a win in ACC play, especially for a team like Wake, who really isn't all that great, was a big step in the right direction for them. So, I don't really know what to make. I mentioned Jim Larrañaga, and look, we always know that, he's going to bring something. But, look, you got Likes, and then really outside of him, there's not really anybody else that I think is really all that overly impressive, at this point, from what I'm seeing. Again, another team where the rebounding numbers are not great. They average 35 rebounds per game, which is the lowest number that we've seen in conference play for sure. Maybe, I'm not willing to speculate just off of a guess here, but it's got to be somewhere near the bottom tier of the teams that we've played so far this year. So again, Carolina should be able to have an advantage on the glass. And that's one of the areas that I think they're really going to have to dominate in this game against Miami, because we know every time that we play them, these guys are going to show up.
Yeah, one thing you know about a Jim Larinaga team is they're going to be physically tough with you. They defend about as good as any team in the conference, especially in the half court. So that's going to be, a big part of this game is going to be, can Carolina execute in the half court? The other night against Notre Dame, it's probably the first time all year our defense won us the game because, again, the offense had another rough night in the half court. Although I think that was good for them to prove that they could win without being sharp on offense. But, on the road, you're going to have to execute a little bit better than we have been the last couple nights out. So, and also, this Miami team, they're balanced. They do feature 5 guys in double figures. Likes is their leading scorer, but they do have 5 guys capable of scoring. It's just, they're just, I don't know if to say they're bad. They don't do anything great. They don't shoot the ball great, 46% overall, only 72% from the line, and then 36% from 3. And like you said, the rebounding, only 35 a game. Carolina averages roughly 44. So this is another night where if Carolina dominates the glass, they should get the win.
One other thing really quickly on Miami. I mean, one of the keys for Carolina, and this is something that they said on the broadcast the other night, and us as Carolina fans have known it for a while. One of the main things that Roy Williams kind of focuses on is getting into the opposing team's bench, make them use their bench players. You mentioned that they have 5 guys that are in double figures. All 5 of those guys are starters, and after that, the drop-off is pretty significant to their bench players. So if I'm Carolina, my goal is to get into their bench. I mean, the only guy on their bench that really plays significant minutes that really brings anything to the floor would be Deng Gak, who averages 4.1 rebounds per game. So he's really just going to be a guy that they might put in there for some size, just to potentially get some rebounds. But other than that, their bench really hasn't been all that effective this year at all. Just by looking at it, they routinely go maybe at the most I think they would go is probably 8 deep. More typically 7 deep. So again, it's not really a deep team. So if you're Roy Williams, that has to be part of the game plan. But when you look at it, I guess for Carolina, from a Carolina standpoint, again, you mentioned the half court. I thought there were times where they looked effective, especially late in the second half. And I think that's, you're going to have some guys that step up and start shooting better. Cam Johnson has to shoot a lot better than he shot in the last 2 games. Kenny Williams has to continue to shoot how he shot in the last 2 games because he's found his offensive touch a little bit. You'd like to see Kobe White start to become a little more efficient as the season's gone along. I feel like his offensive game hasn't progressed from early in the season as much as maybe some would like. I mean, he's still scoring. He still has those games where he's able to put up a lot of points, but he is having to put up a lot of shots to do it. And so is Luke May. Luke May, you want to see him be able to finish inside at the basket. But, if they're able to do that, and if Nazir Little is able to do what we saw him do the other night against Notre Dame, drive the basket whenever you have that chance, if you're up top, outside the arc, or if you need to get down in the low post. I thought that was extremely effective. I told you I thought it was effective against Louisville, and then we saw it again the other night against Notre Dame. If that's how he's got to play, and if that's where he's most effective is by getting down in the post, he needs to do it. I know he's not a typical 4. He's a guy that was expecting to come in and be a guy that could create his own shot out of the 3 position, but that really just hasn't happened. So if you've got to play that 4 role and get down in the post, go ahead and bang with some of the big guys down there and then potentially be that guy that on the defensive end can get up and really shock some people with how well you're able to rebound. I think that's the role that he's got to be willing to take on. And against Miami, I think he could really break out on the glass considering that Miami is struggling rebounding. So, from a Carolina perspective, there are some things that, of course, Larinaga is going to try to slow him down and put him in the half court, but there are things they can do to be effective. And, it starts, I think, by getting the ball inside. I mean, is that going to be one of your focuses for this game?
It always is, and for me, especially in conference play. I'm with you. I think one of the guys that I'm most intrigued to watch play is Nazir Little. I wrote about it after the Notre Dame game where this is his best performance against elite competition he's had all year, because a lot of his better performances have been against the smaller guys. And so I'm interested to see, does he build enough confidence that now it carries over, because we need that production, especially with Sterling Manley still sidelined for we don't know how much longer. And if, no matter how he has to get the 11 points and 6 rebounds, I don't care. I'm with you. I love seeing him, on the block in the painted area, using his physical ability. And then, of course, getting on the glass is just, every player needs to do that for this team. So I'd like to see the ball pounded inside. Luke May is only 9 for his last, I think, 31 between the Louisville and Notre Dame games. That number's got to be better, but at some point, Luke May's too good to keep playing this bad. You mentioned Cam Johnson. He's had back-to-back subpar games. We knew this was going to happen, because you're not going to shoot as well as he's had all year long for 40 straight games. It doesn't happen in college, and not even Steph Curry does it in the NBA. So at some point, he'll rebound. But I'd like to see us really bully this team inside. Let's go into their arena and physically beat them up. I think Garrison Brooks, people have been hard on him and this, that, and the other, but he's been a solid player, and just continue to be solid inside. Luke May, a little bit more efficient, a little bit more effective. Then Nazir, when you come off the bench, really be engaged, be energetic, be physical, and really dominate your man. So we'll go ahead and, pick this game and pick our player. I think the Heels will improve to 4-1 in ACC play, and improve to, more importantly, 3-0 on the road in conference play, which is never easy to do in the ACC. And I think the guy that's going to help carry this team to the win will be Luke May. I think this will be a bounce back game for him because he had a quick start against Notre Dame, then he went cold. But I think Saturday he'll put a full 40-minute effort together and really lead this team to a big time win on the road.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm around the same area that you are. I think this is going to be a pretty tough game, as always, whenever we play them. But, I feel ultimately, we do have the talent advantage. I feel like rebounding, we've got to be able to clean the glass like we want to, and I feel like we will be able to do that against Miami. So, yeah, I think it's probably a little bit closer than a lot of people will want to believe. But again, this is ACC conference play. People have to understand that, look, you're not always going to blow teams out in the ACC. That's just not how the ACC works. So I see it probably in the single digits, but I feel like ultimately, when it comes down to the last minute of the game, Carolina fans will be breathing a little bit easier than, let's say, some of the games that we'll see later in the season. The guy that I think we'll be talking about, I'm going to be this guy and go with Nazir Little. I think, he builds on the good game that he had against Notre Dame. I just talked about it. I think if he's able to put himself in the low post and really get himself working down there. Also, if he's up top, I want to see him drive the lane. And even if it's, driving the lane and having to kick out to an open guy for 3, that's part of his game that really no one has talked about. He's not really a guy that's been a phenomenal passer of the basketball, but if you want to make it easier on yourself, drive the lane and give yourself something to pass to. Give yourself a guy that's wide open. I think he does that in this game against Miami. I think he has arguably his best game of the season, might even be a better performance than the game against Notre Dame, and I think he's a big reason why Carolina ends up pulling out the victory.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that would make, a lot of our fan base happy that's been clamoring for him to play like the player we expect him to be. This is a homecoming for him as well, because he did play high school basketball at the IMG Academy, and I think it's Bradenton, Florida. So, and that might give him extra motivation to play good, because I'm sure he'll have a lot of family and friends in town to see his abilities on the basketball floor. So, hopefully, most importantly, hopefully Carolina gets to 4-1 and 14-4 overall, because next Monday they do have a big-time game against Virginia Tech in the Smith Center. But you don't want to overlook Miami, because, like you said, this has been a a tough place for us to play. The 17 national title team lost by double figures there. So anything is possible when we play in Coral Gables. But hopefully the Heels do find a way to get this win. I do want to thank you for joining me on this edition of the Roy's Boys podcast. I do want to encourage you guys to subscribe to the podcast through Spreaker, iTunes, Spotify, and of course you can find us on Facebook and Twitter. Well, thank you guys for listening. Go Tar Heels.